Today, he's going to talk about 3 strategies to set records while others retreat. And I just want to send some encouragement to you today. You know, I have over the last several days, even this weekend, heard just amazing story after amazing story. You know, my dad told me a long time ago, you are what you think you are. And everything we Franklin Group. Many of you met Sarah several weeks ago, and with 23 dealerships, they are tracking in some stores 87%. So, guys, people are still, and on top of that, service drives are still full, and they're selling automobiles. So, as different states.
Hey, Holly Ann, I'm not sure if you're getting the same audio cuts that I'm getting. So can you just make sure that you're getting clear sound on your end, because I'm having a hard time with Tim.
You're coming in great, Jonathan, but we are, Tim is going out a little bit.
Okay. So I'm not sure where.
Jonathan, why don't you just take over, okay?
I'll take over for now as Tim gets his sound check in order. I want to thank
Jonathan.
Yeah, thank you so much. I want to thank everybody for joining us today for this presentation. I'm Jonathan Dawson, founder of Sellchology, a way of selling through psychology, and I appreciate the invitation by Tim to be on here. I know where Tim was going with what he was doing as his intro, encouraging the dealers with what's being done in the market. I too am hearing, like him, really positive things from dealers that are open and operational, regardless of the degree of operational functions you have at your store, whether you're doing curbside, home delivery, digital only, or your store's got full access. What we're seeing and hearing is a lot of positive things from a lot of dealerships that are taking action. So that's, of course, part of what this conversation we're about to have is all about. And so with that being said, and as Tim gets his sound check in order, let's get right into the presentation here and what we're going to be talking about with these strategies. And so I want to begin by just giving you an overview of what to expect from the conversation we're about to have here, which is the 3 strategies to set records while others retreat. I just got off of a general managers and executive management call right before this one. And one of the managers that I was talking to specifically said he had a record month in March, and they're currently pacing to have a record month in April as well. And what I'm finding is that there are certain things that dealerships who are succeeding and dealerships that are really prospering while others panic, a couple things that they're doing that I think are lessons that are applicable that we can transfer and translate over to other stores. So that's what I want to focus on. Specifically today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the 5 buyer types that are part of a recession cycle, why this is important for not only yourself to know, but why it's important for your team to understand this so they have an expectation of what's about to happen and what is happening. The next thing we're talking about today is the most important message that you can be delivering to your people and to your team right now and to your audience. And then the one of the largest mistakes, in some cases, I think the number one mistake that sales teams might be making right now, and how you can prevent that from being the store situation that you're having. You have salespeople right now who are probably trying to be productive and profitable, and they might be making this mistake. We want to try to address that. So let's get right into our first topic, which is these 5 buyer types, these 5 primary buyer types that you can be looking for, expecting, and if you're open and operational right now, that you're probably already seeing. And again, I'm going to focus on psychology for a second here. I want to talk a little bit about the psychology behind these buyer types, and not just what they are, but why it matters. These are the 5 buyer types, and I want to share with you that there is a timeline to these, and there is a process or an approach that you should be taking with each of these. So as you can see on the screen there, the credit or solution buyer is part of a recession buying cycle. So even when the market dips, you still have people who have credit challenges who are trying to see if they can get into a more reliable car than what they have now, if they can lower their interest rate from what they have now, if they can, for the same payment they're making now, can they get a better car than what they currently have? But you got your basic credit solution Buyers. They're not initially impacted that much by a downturn in the economy. Your Your average 500 credit score buyer is not focused on the stock market right now. That's not where their concern is. And so you're going to see these people still coming in and asking about deals. The pragmatic utilitarian buyer is your next type that you're going to see even in a recession cycle. This is a pragmatic utilitarian, or what we might normally call a needs buyer, but it's a little bit different because this person is reluctantly in the market. So your pragmatic utilitarian buyer is the buyer whose car just broke down. It's a major mechanical repair, and or the buyer that maybe was just in a car accident and now they need a new car. Maybe their family is expecting twins and they need a bigger car, or their company downsized and took away their car and now they need to get their own personal vehicle. So they're a reluctant buyer. They're coming in to solve a specific need or problem. They're trying to address this pragmatically, and they're trying to get this problem solved. However, it's very important that you understand that these are reluctant buyers. They don't want to be doing this right now with everything else going on in the world today. This is not the timing for which they want to have to deal with this. Your third buyer type is what's called the exemption buyer. This is, again, based in psychology. This is the buyer who initially doesn't believe that the recession is actually happening yet. Or they are the buyer who, in the case of COVID, who didn't believe that this was a real disease or virus or pandemic. You may recall, it made the news, there was an athlete who was featured on the news for touching all these microphones and just to show that he's not afraid of the virus. And then it was like a few days later, it was actually determined that he had already contracted the virus and he was COVID positive. But the behavior displayed by touching those microphones was an example, an illustration, if you will, of what an exemption person thinks. They think they're exempt from the rules. They think they're the exception to what everybody else has to do. They're not necessarily going to be influenced by what the media says, that media is not going to tell me how to spend my money. So this is an exemption mindset. Your next buyer is the incentivized buyer. Typically in a recession cycle, they come out a little bit later than we've seen them, but because the manufacturers have responded so quickly, and because the government, quite frankly, has responded so quickly with government support and aid and financial support and aid, we're seeing more incentivized buyers now. This is the buyer who was waiting in the wings, looking for an opportunity to take advantage of the situation and was wanting to see the incentives come out. And that's what brings them into the market. And your fifth and final type is what's called the revenge buyer. And this is a buyer whose psychology is bent towards an act of revenge against whatever was holding them back. So when you don't have a recession, when you don't have a virus impacting the economy, the classic revenge buyer that your dealership would normally see is the buyer who just came out of a divorce and would say, I was in that relationship where they controlled me and told me what to do. Now I get to spend money my own way, and so I'm going to get the car I want. Or possibly you may have had a client who just finished their last round of chemotherapy, and they're acting out almost as an act of revenge against cancer. I'm going to go buy the Jeep Wrangler that I want because, by God, you only live once, and so it's kind of your YOLO buyer, right? So the revenge buyer is oftentimes somebody who maybe their final kid went off to college, and they finally look at each other and say, honey, last kid's gone. I'm going to go buy that RV, or I'm going to go ahead and buy that truck that I've always wanted. This is an act of kind of revenge against whatever was holding me back. Now, in a recession, this same buyer shows up, and the reason they show up is, of course, they've been cooped up, pent up. It's the pent up demand buyer. It's the surge buyer. It's the one that says, I'm sick and tired of waiting. I want to go spend some money. I want to get out of my house. So you'll see, especially premium brands like Louis Vuitton and things like this, they will have a spike in sales coming out of a recession because all these women are like, I'm finally going to spend some money. So these are the types of buyers that you're going to have. And I want to show you a little bit of the sales cycle, or kind of the buying cycle, and tell you why this is important that you understand and your people understand these buyers, because they need to be approached differently, and how you sell and how you close them will be different as well. So as we look at this kind of how the buyers move through the market, look at that purple line and kind of say that purple line represents a normal sales volume, right? This is what would have happened if it wasn't for the recession. And then you see the red dip, that's obviously the recession line, that's what's happening. What you'll notice is I kind of try to illustrate this is the credit buyer, which is represented by the yellow arrows. The credit buyer stays pretty constant through the first part of the recession. But as the recession comes out, as we come out of it, what happens is you see an increase in them, because obviously the recession has caused more people's credit to be damaged. And therefore you get more credit challenged buyers towards the tail end. So you want to make sure that, especially as we come out of this, that your, internal departments for dealing with subprime and special finance customers is in really a great shape, because you're going to see an influx, and whoever positions themselves and capitalizes on that properly will be able to help more of those buyers get back on their financial feet. You see that the pragmatic utilitarian, which is the orange line, is pretty constant throughout, again, the first part of the recession, but you'll see more of them towards the tail end as well, because as money starts to flow, as security, job security and security in the market start to happen, you'll see more businesses buying more vehicles, more fleet purchases. You'll see people letting go of their money more and making that hard decision that they've needed to, but they've held off on. So your first wave of pragmatic utilitarian is your true hardcore need buyer typically. Your second wave is the people who have a need, but they've been holding off until they finally have to go, I can't drive this car anymore, I need something else. And you'll see more in them come at the second half. You'll notice that the exemption buyers are kind of the inverse. So they actually start out with larger percentage. You'll see more of them. That's why the arrow is longer. So the arrow for them, you'll see more of those people at the beginning of a recession cycle, and then they start to dwindle off towards the tail end. And then you see, of course, the incentivized buyers, and we all anticipate this, and we've already started to see some of this, but they start off very small. You're not seeing very many of them. And then as more incentives come out and as people start to realize that I better buy now before the incentives go away or before the inventory and availability goes away, so they go ahead and start to come out probably halfway through, and we see a lot more of them towards the tail end as they pull the revenge buyer into the market. Your revenge buyer is actually your most important one. They're the surge. They're actually what all of us are basically waiting for. We're all hoping and waiting for the market to release and enough people to go, you know what, forget about it. I'm not waiting anymore. I'm going to go do what I want, and I'm going to go buy cars. And so what happens is you can create a kind of a micro economy at your dealership and in your market. You can create a micro economy where if you handle the first three buyers really well, and you take care of the incentivized buyers with a good, strong message, what happens is you'll actually start to pull the revenge buyers through social influence or social proof, which I'm going to talk about a little bit here today as well. But you want to make sure your team does a good enough job with those first three and that fourth buyer. And what will happen is within your own local market and local economy, you'll actually start to activate the Joneses effect. And the Joneses effect, as we all understand, the keeping up with the Joneses, that psychology of purchasing is when enough revenge buyers see enough incentivized buyers buying, they don't want to miss out. And they go, you know what, I'm tired of waiting. I've seen everybody else is doing it. I'm going to do it. And that's the bulk of the buyers that will come and kind of surge towards the end there. So that's a little bit of what that looks like. What you want to do, and let me give you a couple of word tracks if you're taking some notes. Let me give you some specific things that you can do. And also, if you don't mind, if you have questions, there is a chat feature within this app that you can be using right now. And the chat feature would allow you to ask any clarifying questions as well. And there'll be a time for us to kind of address those specifically. I think Holly Ann will actually be doing that for us and bringing those to light. So if you have some specific questions about this, as I kind of lay out the plan here, please feel free to add those to the chat feature. But what you want to do is you want to teach your team how to identify these buyers fairly quickly. And I'm going to give you a very simple word track that your people can be using. In fact, I've been teaching this now for a couple of months in preparation of this. And so my students have been using this with great success. I've already gotten wonderful feedback from its effectiveness. And the word track basically goes like this. What you want to do is you want to say, obviously, thank you for the opportunity to visit with us, whether it be online, on the phone, or on the lot. Thank the customer for the opportunity. And then you want to essentially acknowledge this event. So you say, with everything happening in the world today, and that's basically the line that you need. You don't need to exaggerate it. You don't need to call it the pandemic because you don't want to alienate the exemption people. And you don't want to overly downplay it because you don't want to scare people who are taking it very seriously. So you just say, with everything happening in the world today, thank you for the opportunity to visit with you. What is the main thing you're trying to accomplish? Or what is it that brought you into the market for a vehicle? That's the question. It's very simple. With everything going on in the world today, what is the main thing you're trying to accomplish? Or what is it that brought you into the market today? And that's the question. And by the way, you can ask this on a chat response. You can ask this on a voicemail to a lead that came in. You can ask this on an email correspondence. You can ask this on a customer on the lot. You just say, hey, with everything going on in the world today, I just wanted to ask you, what is the main thing you're trying to accomplish? Or what is it that brought you into the market today? and then let the customer answer. And their answer will actually tell you fairly quickly what type of buyer they are of the 5. And like I said, you'll see the first 3, the majority, and then you'll obviously get the incentivized buyer, assuming your brand is starting to promote that. But once the customer identifies what it is, all you want to do is have your team tailor responses accordingly. So if they're a credit solution buyer, obviously you go down the path of trying to understand, their current situation, what they're trying to solve when it comes to credit. If they're a pragmatic utilitarian buyer, you want to demonstrate massive empathy right away, because you got to remember, these people are reluctant buyers, right? So they didn't plan on being in the market. So just acknowledge that and say, hey, I'm sure today, right now, probably feels like the worst time to have to do this. Acknowledge that they're in a difficult spot and say, what is it you need? What is it you're trying to solve? What is the problem you're trying to address? And just talk in terms of need and problem they're trying to address. What is it they need the vehicle to do? What are they trying to accomplish? What is their goal? Just use pragmatic language like that: need, accomplish, and goal. And as long as you use that language with them, you're going to resonate with them from where their perspective is psychologically, and you're going to be fine. If they're an exemption buyer, they're going to say, man, I'm not worried about what's happening right now. Oh yeah, none of this stuff bothers me. I don't care what everybody else does. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. When you have an exemption buyer, you have to talk in terms of exemptionality. So you have to use language that matches them, saying things like, you're in a unique place. Very few people I talk to are in the position you're in. Not many people I'm visiting with have the freedom to be able to buy a car right now like you do. You use language that exemplifies their exceptionality. And when you speak exemption language to an exemption buyer, of course, you're going to be speaking their language. Same thing, of course, with the incentivized buyer. Finding out, of course, what they're trying to accomplish with that, addressing the fact that they're in a unique position because they are a type of exemption buyer. They're also pragmatic because they're trying to take advantage of a situation and it makes sense to do so. That's pragmatic thinking. And then they're also got a partial scarcity to them. They know that the programs are going to end eventually. They know that this won't last forever. So what I would do with an incentivized buyer who tells me, with the interest rates, I saw the rates, I saw the programs, I'm going to use language that matches exemption, which is that they're in a unique position. I'm going to use language that matches pragmatic thinking, which is to say they're doing the smart thing. And then I'm going to use language that matches scarcity, which is to say that they don't want to miss out. So the word tracking would sound something like this. I would say you're absolutely right to be looking now because you're in a unique position to be able to take advantage of these programs. Few people actually qualify for them, and not everybody's willing to go ahead and take advantage of them right now. So it's exciting to see that you can take advantage of that. Also, it makes sense to do so because the inventory will deplete and the people who wait will be left with the green and yellow truck instead of being able to get what they want, because eventually the inventory will disappear and the programs will go away. And that's using exemption, pragmatic, and scarcity language. When you look at the psychology of these buyers, they're all wired a little bit different. And so your language has to be accordingly. When you're dealing with the revenge buyers, if you want to close them and close them well and profitably, all you got to do is use the language of entitlement and deserve. Hey, listen, it sounds like you've waited long enough. You're entitled to get what you want. It sounds like you've saved up and you deserve to get what you want. It sounds like you put this off longer than you had to. And I'm excited to see that you finally get what you want. You want to use the language of entitlement with the revenge buyer because that's how they feel. They feel like I'm finally free, I'm going to get what I want, and that's the language you must use. So those are your 5 buyers and some tips on what to do with those people. Obviously, if I had more time in this presentation, I'd deep dive into it, but I want to carry on the conversation because I got a few more things I want to share with you. And the next part I want to share with you is really about the message that you should be delivering. I want to check on Tim's sound real quick. And Tim, can you give me a sound check and tell me if
I'm actually here, and I'm glad that you touched on that. I apologize for the big fancy headphones that I'll never use again. So anyway, especially, the credit solution, I was just talking about that, the people, unfortunately, this has been tough. And thankfully, the OEMs have come alongside the dealers. And I think they're being a little more flexible, with the captive lenders and so on to accept these. But, the buyer's going to look a little different over the next coming months and as we sell more cars. So I'm glad you did touch on that. That's great stuff. And as far as the way most of these conversations are happening, you obviously can have these conversations via text, via chat, via phone, because there's well, not most dealership, there's probably half of America right now that are not allowed to take ups.
That's right.
So we're even putting signs in dealerships with numbers on them to text management, and immediately pings management so they can open up that conversation. So if you haven't done that, that's another great idea to have these conversations. First, you have to build a bridge to have these conversations. But no, this is great stuff. Please continue, Jonathan.
Yeah, appreciate it. I'd also like to ask again, for those who are active and live panelists, because I know this will be recorded and shared later, but if you're active on the stream now, I'd be curious to see just in your own market, which of these 5 would you say that you're seeing as a share of your business? So if you want to number them just in order left to right: credit, pragmatic, exemption, incentivized, and revenge, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When you think about your current sales right now, where do you see the market right now in your own unique area? What kind of customers are you seeing? If you'd throw some of those in the chat, I'd like to hear that as well. That'd be awesome. And I see somebody said losing him. Jeff Baker said losing him. I'm not sure if that's referring again to Tim or in referring to who. So please, again, add the comments in there. Somebody's putting in 3, 2, 1, mostly in that order. Yeah. And again, I would anticipate that you get more exemption buyers at the beginning, as I indicated here. So that's good to see. Yeah. So if you think about the buyers that you have, you want to target your message just like any other kind of marketing. You always want to try to match your marketing message to the buyer that you're looking at and the psychology of that buyer. But in general, there's one major theme that I want to talk about right now next, which is the most important message you can be sharing with your team and with your audience. And that is really just the message of certainty. So during uncertain times, the most important message of all is the message of certainty. And you have a responsibility, whether you're in sales right now listening to this, if you're in middle management, if you're one of the executive managers, you have a responsibility to communicate certainty. And whoever wins the certainty game right now in uncertain times wins. So we all need to be focused on how do we communicate certainty in our messaging. Now, obviously, if you're in management and you want your team to be the most productive and profitable that they can be right now, you need a team that's willing to make phone calls, that's willing to send emails. I get messages from dealers and managers who will ask me and say, John, what do I do? I've got my team and they're not really willing to make any phone calls. They don't want to be shut down. One of my salespeople came to me and said, I got yelled at by a customer for being greedy because I called them, and so I'm like, I don't want to call anybody anymore. Well, this is what happens when you have a sales team that lacks certainty, when they don't know how to identify the buyers, when they don't know how to speak the language, when they don't know what questions to ask, when they don't know how to approach or respond accordingly. You have this massive uncertainty in your sales team. And uncertainty is, of course, the largest driver of lack of behavior, right? If you've got anybody who won't do something, the number one reason why they won't do something is always a lack of certainty. They don't feel confident in the outcome or the approach. So I'm going to talk to you real quick about what you can do to influence the market by influencing your audience, whether it be your team or your marketplace, with the message of certainty. Let's take a look at what that looks like. The 2 places where you need certainty: first and foremost, your team, followed by your clients. Let's take a look at how to do that. When creating certainty with your people, communication is by far the most important aspect of that right now. So your communication needs to be continuous, making sure your people hear from you often. It needs to be consistent, making sure the message isn't changing all the time. It needs to be confident, making sure it comes from a place of strength, and it needs to be clear, making sure that you have a vision for them to see and to follow. I had a manager, a sales manager on social media, not a client of mine, just a random sales manager. And he was on a thread talking about how he's starting to practice his online poker skills as a way of making money because he doesn't think the car business is going to rebound for the next year. Now, remember, he's a sales manager in a sales group talking about how he's practicing online poker so that he can create revenue or offset his income, because as a sales manager, he doesn't expect the market to recover. Can you imagine that's your sales manager right now? And that's the way they think. So this is the problem if you don't have clarity and certainty communicated from the top down. And I'm going to show you some practical ways you should be doing that or looking to do that. But this is dangerous stuff, because as the speed of the leader goes, so does the speed of the crew. Let me show you some examples of what this looks like when done well. So here you're seeing this Carter Myers handout. Now, if you see this Carter Myers handout, and because somebody will be listening just by audio and not have the video, let me explain it for you. But what you're looking at is a COVID-19 information and resources put together by the dealer. And it's got a list of all kinds of things, including how to file for tax deadline extension, your tax payment extension, mortgage payment assistance, eviction suspension assistance, utility payments, federal loan assistance, car payment deferral, how to talk to your credit card for repayment assistance. It was a list put together by the management team of all the resources, proactively thinking, what does our team need to know in order for them to feel emotional and mental certainty about how they can come to work and what they can do. So this was put together as a resource list provided to all the staff. And then of course, they were able to share that with their customer base as well. So communication is all about telling people what they can do right now, what you're gonna do for them, what we can all do together, and what we're all gonna do next. You'll also see in the background of this image, you'll see Zoom calls. And these are just examples of my stores that I work with, and the sales meetings and the management meetings that I've been part of for the last few weeks. Continuous ongoing communication is critical right now if you want to make sure that your team knows what is happening. So you want to communicate directly with your organization, but you also want to communicate directly with your customer. And when you communicate with the customer, a couple things to consider. Again, this is some psychology here, but you want to make sure your marketing message communicates empathy, that you are not being egocentric. This is not about you right now. This is not about we can't sell cars, or we're not selling enough cars, or the government is bad because we can't sell cars. This is not the time to be making that message. You'll get a small percentage of the population that'll support you, but the vast majority of people who are hurting right now don't want to hear it. That's not what they're interested in learning about. That's not where they want your company message to be going. You want to make sure your message is encouraging, making sure that you're optimistic about the future and encouraging about what you're going to be doing for your community. Educational when possible, like the flyer I showed you just a second ago. Make sure they know that the changes that you've made at your store and that you're an educational resource for resources that your community needs. Also make sure your message is engaging and that you're engaging. Make sure that you engage with your community. Make sure that your team is staying active on social media and that this is not the time to go silent. This is not the time to go dark. You need to make sure your message gets out there. So try not to do this, right? Try not to be this image here of the tuba player blowing her horn directly into the face of somebody else. Hey, I sell cars, and telling everybody that. This is not the time to be just commercializing your messaging. Instead, here's an alternative, and let me play this video for you. I think you'll find interesting. This is again produced by that same Carter Myers Auto Group, one of my clients.
The streets sure are different these days. So are the ways we talk to one another, walk with one another, help one another. Delivering help is different too. At Carter Myers Automotive, we've switched gears to deliver help. Like dropping off groceries to neighbors in need, turning our showroom into a blood drive center, or simply helping out with a notary.
Things are different, but one thing remains the same: our ability to move lives forward. Go to cmacars.com or call our helpline.
Carter Myers Automotive, delivering help.
So I was just talking to the president there, Liza, who you just saw on the screen. I was just talking to her before this stream here. And that helpline is set up throughout 5 different communities that their dealerships are located through. And they're getting calls from everything from delivering groceries to people. One older lady had her glasses were broken and she needed somebody to just get her a new set of glasses. And so a member of the team from Carter Myers found out what she needed, went to the store, bought the glasses, and delivered them to her house for this old lady in their community who called in on the helpline. What a great example. Let me show you one more marketing message that I think is really resonating right now, and I think you'll be able to take a lesson from it as well. This is from Peoria Ford out in Peoria, Arizona, from their fleet department. I hope you'll enjoy this.
Peoria Ford Commercial Fleet, Arizona's #1 Ford store. We're right alongside you amid the COVID-19 crisis that's quickly evolving, disrupting many sectors of our lives and requiring us to work differently, including from home for an undetermined period. For all of us, it's overwhelming and confusing. We know you're likely to be feeling a whole range of fears, including your job, maybe even your company and employees' well-being, your health, your family and friends, and your finances. Rest assured, you're not alone. We're right there with you. During these times, dealers, manufacturers, and banks are getting creative with their loan programs and incentives, which can save you thousands, or even put thousands back in your pocket. As an example, Peoria Ford Fleet can postpone your payments up to 120 days from today, while doing 0% for up to 84 months. And that's just one example. Please reach out by phone, email, text, or simply comment below and let us know how we can help you through these uncharted times. From all of your friends at Peoria Ford Fleet. And remember, you can always find us online 24/7 at peoriafordfleet.com.
So that particular video went out, and within 6 days, it had 76,000 views and 43 shares. This is all organic. This is organically viewed and shared, no paid promotional post. Now, I actually talked to the general manager of this store, and that is now well over 80,000 views, and again, all organic. So this is what happens when you tailor your message to match your market and tailor your message to be about consumers and not so much just about yourself. I want to give you another practical way that you can communicate with your audience and find out where they're at. And this is this pain scale here. Now, I've been using this in my communication or having my stores use this in communication via online email, via chat and text. And it's been really powerful as a way of talking to the audience through even social media, asking basically, where are they on this scale right now? Are they just dealing with awareness? Are they paying attention to it? Are they cautious? Are they protecting themselves? Are they eliminating exposure entirely? On a scale of 1 to 10, where are they at on this scale? Now, what's happening when salespeople are using this as a response to an e-lead or to a chat or to a customer who's come in through Facebook, is they're finding out kind of what the customer's psychology is, allowing then the salesperson to focus on if they're a 7, on the scale, if they're very concerned right now, we need to act and react back to the customer like we're an 8, 9, or 10 even. Because if we demonstrate that we're a 9 and they're a 7, if we say, hey, I know you're concerned, we're also very concerned. Let me tell you exactly what we're doing at our dealership to protect you and your family, to safeguard you, to be secure and sanitized. Let me tell you what we're doing. Then you create a buyer out of that 7 by showing that you are an 8 or 9. And then, of course, on the other side of the scale, the same thing. If you're dealing with a customer who's doesn't have a high concern, if they're more of an exemption buyer, you tailor your approach to the exemption buyer. Because if I'm a 1 or 2 right now, but you act like you're a 7 or 8, I think you're ridiculous. I think you're crazy. I think you're a conspiracy theory nut. So this is why tailoring your message is so important, and learning how to find out where the customer's at is really important as well.
Jonathan, let me show you. I think this is
Go ahead.
Great. Yeah, no, I think this is great. Can you send this? We're obviously going to send an email, and I see the text coming in. Some people having to work deals, which that's a great thing, and wanting copies of this. So we're going to send this out. If you registered for this, I know this gets shared, 50 times more than log, which is great. But I would love if you would have the ability to send this so we can attach this somehow in the email to where they can copy and send this out. I think this is a really good idea, especially now.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So I want to just give a little shout out. So my friend Steve Ressler over at DriveCentric, some of you will be familiar with them as a CRM company. Steve was actually the original author of this idea. I modified it just a little bit and got his permission to modify it and then share it with my team as well. He was actually using it as an internal training tool to say, hey, you need to be asking yourselves where your clients are at when you have a lead. Based on the client, you kind of put the client on a scale in your head. And I told Steve, I think you can take it a step further. You can actually send this to the client and have the client respond back with a number and tell you where they're at. And he hadn't thought that far through. So yes, absolutely. This is a great resource, and it's already had great success. Let me show you another way that I think you can increase certainty with your audience, and that's just to make your efforts really clearly visible. So what you see here is just a few examples of that. On the right and the top right, you see a We Care sign. This is a poster board sign that's displayed throughout the dealership show floor. And it's got basically, as you can see, a list of the things that the dealership is doing and where their commitment to safety, security, and sanitization is. What is happening at each workstation, what they're refraining from, what they are doing, what they're not doing. And these are displayed publicly throughout the entire dealership for a show floor that's open. Obviously, you should have a version of this that can be sent via a digital response to a lead as a way of letting the clients know, hey, You said you're a 7, let me tell you what we're doing, and give them this as a response. Also, if you do have open show floor, or as your floor is open, having displayed, making sure the staff is using PPE, the personal protective equipment, make them available as possible, make them available to your customers, whether it be a form of rubber gloves, disposable masks, disposable pens, whatever you can do at your store to take away a customer's fear that they might have exposure. That's what's going to be important. Having that signage that tells your story. You see in the bottom right from the Furman Auto Group, these signs were displayed throughout their dealership's frontage, which just simply says, "Thank you, healthcare workers. Basically, we love you." And so this, again, just showing support for their community. But another example is to have checklists for your demo and for your delivery. You may have some internal checklists, which is to say you're telling your staff, here's what a delivery of a vehicle should go through. But are you clearly communicating that in a demonstrable way to your clients? Do you have a customer-facing checklist, not just an internal one for you to use to make sure the process is followed in store, but an external one that you can share with clients that are visiting your website? They can download, a PDF or visit a page that says, here's exactly what happens before you demo one of our vehicles. Here's exactly what happens before you take delivery. We do a 117-point inspection, so to speak, and here's what is included in that. Make sure that you're taking all of your efforts and making them very demonstrable and very clearly visible. I'll give you another great example of that one of my stores is doing, which is they have all their workstations not only separated, but they also have them staged. So the chairs have to be the left armrest of the chair is set up so it's touching the desk. That's the indication that that table is staged and has been wiped down and cleaned. If that chair is moved, if a chair is moved away where the left arm is no longer touching the table, that's a way that everybody visibly can see that somebody has been in that spot. And so then it's everybody's responsible. Go wipe it down, wipe down the handles, wipe down everything, the armrest, wipe down everything, and put the left armrest up against the table top again. This is just a physical representation, a demonstrable representation of what you're doing to take your clients' safety in mind. So obviously also workplace dividers I'm seeing with plexiglass and things like this. Now you may individually think this is excessive. You may think some of this stuff is a little bit over the top and crazy, and I would understand if you felt that way. But I tell you, for the other percentage of the population that is taking this, that's on that scale from a 5 to a 10, they see this and they see this as responsible business management. So whether you have a personal belief this is the right way to do it or not, I'm going to encourage you that don't miss out on the market share of people that are going to appreciate this by simply not being prepared. We're about to switch to our last topic, but before I do that, I wanted to, Tim, see if you had any questions, comments on that, and then certainly if anybody has any questions in the chat that we can address as well.
Sure. No, I think, a lot of this, I think it's better to have too much than not enough, because it's also rather, you need to be better. They say safe than sorry. This is our new norm, whether we want it, nobody wanted this. But there is, the new norm is going to be the new norm. And that's going to be, there's some things that my family are doing that we're going to continue to do, washing hands, trying to, whenever we can find hand sanitizer, making our own out of alcohol, but this is the new norm. So obviously I think most dealerships have done a pretty good job. Several, like you've displayed here, have done some unique things that really stand out. So no, I think it's great. But this is where we're at, and the good news is people are still buying cars. So yeah, let's
Amen.
Let's hear your last thought.
Yeah, so here's my last thought, and it really has to do with two concepts that you may not be familiar with. This is not something you would hear in normal daily language, but it's two psychological principles that are important in sales. The pareidolia effect and the mirror neurons effect. I'm going to explain what they are because they're kind of scientific terms, and if you've never heard them before, you've probably experienced them because they're basic human experiences. But it's important that your people understand the power of this, because this is going to lead into the number one mistake I think people are making, and it has to do with really an ignorance of how powerful these concepts are. So if you take a look at this first one here, this is an example of the pareidolia effect. Obviously, as you look at this, what does everybody see? Right away, you see faces. The pareidolia effect is seeing patterns, especially that of faces, in inanimate objects or random objects. Why is that important? Because our brain is literally hardwired to look for faces. It's hardwired to look for faces. from an early age, as a little baby, we're taught to identify faces and attach meaning and relationships to those faces. So we actually crave, it's a deep need in our psychology to see faces. That's part of why, by the way, being socially distant like this and being home locked like this is so destructive to people, because when you're not interacting, when you're not connecting with people, it hurts your own psychology. Now, this is relevant to the car business right now because I think there's a huge mistake that we're making. And I'm going to kind of elaborate on it, but I want to take you to the next one, which is mirror neurons for a second, and bring that to your attention. Some of you will appreciate this here, and this is an example of mirror neurons. All right, so if you watched that just now, and at any moment, at any point in time, if you went, ooh, ow, oh, ew, ah, if you had any reaction like that at all, that's your mirror neurons firing. Your mirror neurons are the part of your brain that basically anticipates pain or anticipates the emotion and the empathy. It's the empathy center of your brain. It's the part of you that kind of says, oh my gosh, if that was happening to me, how would that feel? It's why when you watch a scary movie, you feel scared. It's why when you watch a comedy, you laugh. When you watch a romantic comedy, you feel warm fuzzies. When you watch something get hurt or somebody get hurt, you go, ooh. Your mirror neurons are the part of your brain that says that could be me. Now, let me tell you why that's important and why it's a mistake I think people are making. Here's the number one mistake I think salespeople are making, and this comes from a chat, a thread between me and a salesperson who's at one of my stores. This is one of my clients. And you can see this is dated March 31st. So this is a Facebook chat between me and the salesperson. And then you can see the first part, he says, as long as nothing rolls back, I just counted, I'm on, pretty sure it's gonna be 42, just waiting to make sure I don't wanna jinx it. He ended up with 42 sales in March. That was his personal best. Prior to that, his previous best was in the 20s, and he had a 42 car month. And of course, I'm like, hey, that's awesome. Very long, rewarding, record-breaking, learning and exciting month. So now you can see this is from Thursday. This is actually Thursday of last week. I messaged him again and said, how are you doing? Part of the reason I messaged him was because I stopped seeing any of his posts on social media. Let me connect the pareidolia effect and the mirror neurons to you right now and why this is so important. I stopped seeing the posts on social media that he was doing of all of his happy and sold customers. So he says, I'm doing great. I believe I have 10 to 11 out, which is literally half as many cars as the previous month. And I say back to him, I said, well, can you share with me why I don't see a single photo on your timeline of you, not a single April, hashtag April 40 client? Where's 1 of 40, 2 of 40, 3 of 40? Where is everyone? He says, because we were asked not to broadcast at this time, just so nothing or no one tries to stir things up about what's going on. We're still selling curbside and doing delivery safest way possible, but just at this time, we're asked not to broadcast like I normally do with the pics and such. And I said, well, who asked you? What does it mean not to broadcast? Here's the mistake. The mistake that people are making right now is they stop sharing their story. When you're, if you sold 12 cars last week or 200 cars last month, if you sell a car today or 2 cars or 20 cars today, you need to leverage the pareidolia effect and mirror neurons, which is to say there needs to be a picture on social media of that person's smiling face. There needs to be a video testimonial of that person telling their story. The mirror neurons side is recognizing that if I watch another person having a great experience, if there's a video of somebody saying this was a safe, secure, and sanitized purchase experience, and we had a great time, what happens is when that video testimonial gets shared on social media, YouTube and Facebook and such, is it activates the mirror neurons of everybody who's watching it, which means you create a micro economy of the Joneses effect. When you post those happy photos of smiling customers in front of their vehicles, what happens is the people who watch it, the pareidolia effect kicks in. People look for pictures with faces in it. People want to see that story. They want to know what happened to that person. So the biggest mistake I think that sales teams and salespeople are making right now is they've stopped sharing their story. I'm not seeing enough Facebook videos. I'm not seeing enough photos of happy customers. If you sold 25 cars in the last week or month, how many of those stories can I find on social media right now? How many pareidolia effects are you activating? How many mirror neurons are you activating through your marketing of that story? And that's the big mistake I think people are making right now that can easily be solved. Your next deal that you do, you need a photo of that customer, not just a picture of their car, a photo of that customer. Even if it's a selfie photo of them in front of the vehicle in front of their house because they did a home delivery. But you need to get people's faces on social media and in your marketing, because that is what will activate the Jones effect, which will cause the revenge buyer to come out, which will pull us out of the economy that we're in right now. And that's my closing thought on that. So Tim, I'm going to let you close it up with some wrapped up thoughts that you may have and any questions that you need.
Well, thank you so much, Jonathan. And quite frankly, that's the reason, during this, we just started doing this, several weeks back as the whole COVID thing was getting started, just to encourage. It's so important. Me personally, I can't be around negative. I can't watch the news. I don't care what channel it is or what station it is. I've got to surround myself with positive. And the car business that I've been in since 1989 has been so good to me. And, I just want to help as many brothers and sisters in the automotive space as possible and share these good stories, and let the other dealers, whether we're partnered with them or not, hear success stories, because especially us in the automotive space, we hear that, even as a salesperson, even if I was having a down week or a couple of days, when there was people around me selling automobiles, it energized me to produce that Jones effect, exactly like you're saying. And I think we all do it, that, hey, the world's not coming to an end. I'm actually selling, there's other people actually coming here and buying cars. I need to take a checkup from the neck up and let me go dominate. So, that was the true reason that we started these. And if we're talking to one person or this gets shared 5,000 times, if we are here to encourage. So, just thank you so much and for your time. We are going to be sending out, if you registered for this Tim Talk, we're going to send you as we constantly try to get better. Technology will continue to get better as we try different things through the Tim Talk. So please share this, but we're going to send you a survey on how we can get better. And then with that will be a copy in its entirety, a recording of what we just did. Jonathan, so if you want to get in touch with Jonathan, obviously you can see that there, Sellchology.com. There's his the number that you can reach, as well as an email address. So that concludes our Tim Talk. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Truly appreciate you. And remember, no one is smarter than everyone. And let's continue to get better together. Until next time, guys, thank you so much. Jonathan, thank you again. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you soon.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.